weighing in on the Democratic field for 2020. She was on Good Morning America a bit earlier today, where she was asked about the possibility of Hillary Clinton running again. And here is what she said to that possibility.
Where I am is that right now we should see anybody who feels the passion to get in this race, we need them in there. And I think that the process will play itself out. I haven't really been paying attention and looking at the candidates. I don't think, I think there's just a lot of noise and a lot of talk. It's still pretty early. I think let's see who, wants to roll up their sleeves and get in the race.
I pretty much have a non-answer. I mean, if you were her, would you go there?
Well, she said she's not really paying attention yet. It's too early. I don't know. I think there's already some hats in that.
What do you think?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, in Cleveland, Ohio, in August of 2000, and help me, 15 was it? We had 17 candidates. Is the number of Democrats in the primary going to be more or less than 17? More. I'll say more.
We agree. We agree. You got anything else? We've got like 10
Is
seconds
Michelle
left.
Obama one of them? Yes or no?
Michelle Obama? Oh.
Is she?
No.
I agree.
Okay. We agree.
The problem is we're getting along, and that's an issue.
Yeah, we got to work on that. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again here tomorrow. Outnumbered starts now.
Fox News alert a deadline just over 48 hours from now in Florida's election recount as more lawsuits are filed. And now the stakes have been raised with the judge warning all sides to tone down the rhetoric. Good luck with that. This is Outnumbered. I'm Melissa Francis, and here today is Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, Fox Business Network anchor Dagan McDowell, Fox News analyst and co-host of Benson and Harf on Fox News Radio, Marie Harf. And joining us on the couch today, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of the great state of Illinois.
Right. Taking a bow, I see.
That's right, taking a bow.
Yeah.
After
For
that,
anything in particular?
After that beating we took last week in Illinois, we're still here, we're coming back, and we're ready to go again.
Yeah. So this is more of a I'm still here.
We're still here. Some of us survived.
Y'all kind of took a beating in the House.
Yeah, in the House. What as bad as it could have been, though. It could have been way worse.
Well, I like that attitude.
Yeah. We did all right.
Optimism.
All right. The importance of the Florida Senate race growing now as Republican Martha McSally concedes to Democrat Kyrsten Sinema in the race for Senate in Arizona. The Democrats' victory there guarantees that they will hold at least 47 Senate seats, shrinking the size of the Republican majority. This just adding to the tension in Florida as election officials in Broward County and around the state work to complete the mandatory recount by Thursday. Now, Democrat Senator Bill Nelson calling on his GOP challenger, Governor Rick Scott, to recuse himself from any role in the process.
Rick Scott isn't interested in making sure every lawful vote is counted. He's using his power as governor to try to undermine the voting process. He stood on the steps of the governor's mansion and tried to use the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to investigate the Broward elections chief. He's filed lawsuits to try to stop votes from being counted and to impound voting machines.
Governor Scott dismissing Nelson's criticism during an interview with Martha McCallum. Watch.
It's pretty consistent for Bill Nelson. He's always confused. The governor is not responsible for recounts. We have separately elected supervisor elections in each county. They do the recounts, and then the numbers are sent to the Secretary of State's office.
Griff Jenkins is live at the Broward County Supervisor of Elections office in Lauderhill, Florida, with more. Busy place there, Griff.
Just to say the least, Melissa. Let me take you inside the tabulation room right now. The voting is actually, the recounting of the votes is actually happening finally. Now, they spent the last day and a half separating page ones, and they've still got to do that to a batch of vote by mail. But right now, you're witnessing the recount of the batch of early votes. There's a little over 200,000. They're running through these machines. And if you look on the top of the machine, you see envelopes with some ballots ballots in there. Those are the under and over votes that the machine is separating in anticipation of a hand manual recount should this second recount's results prove to be under the threshold of a 0.25 percentage point. Very significant. The deadline, of course, to finish this entire recount is Thursday. Officials say that they believe it's going to happen. And you talk about the Nelson Scott back and forth. President Trump just tweeting, weighing in here again moments ago, tweeting, when will Bill Nelson concede Florida? The characters running the Broward and Palm Beach voting will not be able to find enough votes. Too much spotlight on them now. The president's tweet, not the only one getting some attention. Earlier, we had Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida's tweet, calling for the removal of the supervisor of elections here, Brenda Snipes, for her mistakes in failing to meet and comply with Florida law. But our producer here, Yvonne, just a little while ago, asking Supervisor Snipes specifically about the governor calling for her removal. Here is what Snipes said. She says, I heard he, meaning Governor Bush, wants me out. That's his opinion, and you can't take away a person's opinion. My opinion is we have run a good election program for our voters during my tenure. So that's sort of what's happening with the supervisor here as she tries to get this recount done. Again, all eyes are on that deadline Thursday at 3 p.m. If they do get the recount done, both lawyers for Democrats and Republicans here do believe it's going to be a hand recount, and we're going to get shades of that 2000 recount again when the volunteers and lawyers and everyone else are looking very close at these ballots for their intent. Melissa?
Oh, I hope you got a lot of rest, because I think you're going to be there for a while, Griff. All right, thank you. Let's bring it out to the couch. So, Congressman, this is what strikes me when you hear all this conversation about count every vote. If I was sitting over in Hillsborough County, over in Tampa, I would be looking at this and saying, why did we have to follow the law and they didn't? Why did we have to turn in our ballots and they didn't? And more importantly, if I was a voter in Hillsborough, I'd be like, boy, if I was to working outside the law.
Yeah, I feel like we're entering like the second seal of revelations, like another Florida recount. And it's like, you know, look, we have to make sure everybody that voted legally gets counted. That's important. But at the same time, when you have a situation where you're supposed to announce 30 minutes after the polls close how many ballots were cast, and then there's a lot of questions in past elections, people are going to feel disenfranchised. And my biggest concern with what's going on in politics right now, yes, it's tone and it's all this other stuff, but it's people losing faith in the institutions of government and in the thing that creates the institution of government, which is elections. And if they feel like they've been disenfranchised, their vote's not counting, or somebody gets more of an opportunity to vote than they do, it undermines that whole thing. And everything we have, everything that makes our country great is based on a contract we all have with each other that the majority opinion determines what government looks like.
Marie, I mean, there's a reason those laws are in place that you have to say how many votes there were so close after the closing of the polls, because it just creates an opportunity and it creates that uncertainty, right?
So the judge was very clear in dinging this county for not following that process piece of it, and they should have, because it creates questions. I think we need to be very cautious, though, as this recount proceeds. First, there has been no evidence of voter fraud in this election. Governor Scott was asked about that on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. He's been asked about that on other shows as well. He can't point to anything. There's a lot of insinuations and accusations, but we need to be very careful. That's why the judge that you mentioned in the opening yesterday said we all need to cool it. There is a process under Florida law to first do a machine recount, which is happening now, and then if the margin is close enough, to do a hand recount. They are now following that process, and I know it takes too long. And believe me, I think Florida should do elections better. Like the fact that it's 2018, 18 years after 2000, and Florida still can't figure out in these few counties how to do it. It may be incompetence and it may be bad ballot design, but right now, it does not appear to be fraud. And I think it would be very good if the president and the people running were much more careful with their language, because we don't want people to feel disenfranchised if there's not hard evidence for them to. All right, and that's what worries me.
Absolutely. But in terms of that fraud versus incompetence, and I don't know, I mean, incompetence, I don't know that that's so much better. Former Governor Jeb Bush tweeting, there is no question that Broward County Supervisor of Elections Brenda Snipes failed to comply with Florida law on multiple counts, undermining Floridians' confidence in our electoral process. Supervisor Snipes should be removed from her office following these recounts. Dagan, I mean, we talk about incompetence and we want to be very careful not to call it fraud. However, I wonder how someone can walk around and be so inept and not accidentally fall down a manhole. It starts to stretch the bounds of credulity.
Well, and we've gone through, and I know Lisa can go through them as well, the problems that have happened years and years under Brenda Snipes' leadership. In Broward County. Most recently, there was a court that ruled that she broke election law when she destroyed ballots from the 2016 election 12 months after it instead of 22 months. There was a constitutional amendment, a medical marijuana amendment that was left off some ballots in that year. That is among the other issues. And we should point out if there are criminal penalties for official misconduct regarding elections at the state level in Florida and at the federal level. So if there's real criminality, it should be looked at in the future. The issue here is, and this has been pointed out on Special Report last night, and it was in the Wall Street Journal, Hanging Chad's the sequel. That was the editorial today.
Oh, no, please.
Which says the nonprofit group Fair Vote looked at 4,687 statewide elections between 2000 and 2015. There were only 27 statewide recounts. Only 3 resulted in election reversals. Just 3. Wait, let me just finish. Yeah. Democratic Al Franken in Minnesota, and there was a race in Vermont and a race in Washington's gubernatorial contest. The recounts resulted in an average change in the margin between the 2 lead candidates of 282 votes. So if you see changes, outside of that margin of just a few hundred votes, that smells bad, and it doesn't just smack of ineptitude.
So a couple of things here. Jeb Bush's tweets sort of rich because he is the guy who appointed Brenda Snipes to her position, and then she was reelected since then. But there has been a long history with her, even dating back to 2004, where she failed to send out absentee ballots to, I think it was, tens of thousands of people. To Marie's point, look, there really are no clean hands here in the way that these things are being talked about, or at least elections. You had people on the left calling for faithless electors back in 2016. You also have this narrative that Russia is somehow responsible for President Trump winning the election. So I don't think there's any clean hands on there. Regarding Brenda Snipes, a judge did find her to be in violation of state and federal law for illegally destroying ballots while she was facing a public records lawsuit over those very ballots. So that raises a lot of questions.
Not this year.
Also, in this,
it
was decided this year.
But it wasn't about this election.
No, it was back to 2016. But in this election alone, she's also been found to be in violation of state law for failing, regarding public records requests, for failing to provide this information to Rick Scott's campaign. And to the congressman's point, both Broward County and Palm Beach County were supposed to account for both vote by mail and absentee ballots within 30 minutes of polls closing, as well as 45-minute updates. Neither of those things has happened. So I think with her past history, in combination with the lack of transparency, it does raise questions. Now, if that's fraud, that's up to law enforcement to figure out.
We haven't seen any evidence of
that. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying to have questions is completely fair.
You get into a very tricky area when you go to a hand count as well. Harris was talking about the undervote. 25,000 more votes were cast for governor than in Senate. In the Senate, in the state, and Mark Elias, we remember him from hiring Fusion GPS for the Hillary Clinton campaign. He's representing one of the lawyers representing Senator Bill Nelson. They're kind of anxious to get to that hand recount where you can look at those undervotes. It's like, oh, well, you can go through ballot by ballot by ballot and claim that an individual potentially voted for Senator Nelson. So that's going to be,
okay.
Something
Well,
to watch.
This is all why you got to get it right in the first place. Because we don't want all this everywhere. All right, a new challenge facing the president's pick to be the acting attorney general as Democrats step up pressure on Matt Whitaker to recuse himself from the Mueller probe. All that ahead, plus the death toll now rising.
This Fox News alert, the state of Maryland filing a motion contesting President Trump's appointment of acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. The motion asking a federal judge to install Rod Rosenstein in the place of Whitaker. Critics claiming Whitaker's appointment violates the Constitution. A judge has not yet ruled there. Whitaker served as Jeff Sessions' chief of staff until he was tapped by President Trump. Earlier on America's Newsroom, former Attorney General Mike Mukasey spoke to Bill Hemmer about this new legal challenge.
the president can fill certain vacancies only with the advice and consent of the Senate. The Attorney General position is one of those. Now, the question is whether somebody who is acting Attorney General would have to be somebody who's been confirmed.
Is he a good choice or not for this job?
He's a fine lawyer. If it's something that has to be settled by litigation, I would think that perhaps there are safer choices.
But former independent counsel Ken Starr, who was also on America's Newsroom, believes Whitaker's appointment is legal.
It's a lawful appointment. Under the Vacancies Act, the president has tremendous leeway in who he sees fit to, and remember, this is the executive branch, and there's only one key officer in the executive branch.
Meantime, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Department of Justice is expected to publish a legal opinion in support of Whitaker's appointment. Democrats say that Whitaker's past criticism about Robert Mueller's Russia probe raised questions about his objectivity. With the Wall Street Journal, Congressman is reporting that this opinion from the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel is supposed to cite, it was an issue back in 2003, that a non-confirmed employee can be appointed as the acting director because acting director is an inferior officer under the Supreme Court precedent. But again, how does the White House get this out of the way? Mukasey earlier said that the problem is whatever Whitaker does and makes decisions that he makes are called into question because of this legal tussle.
I think, look, the legality of it, I'll let all the lawyers battle that out and we'll get some kind of resolution. It seems to me like it's an okay from a legal front. I think if I was advising the president, I'd say, let's get a nominee up there, put that person before the Senate and go through this a different way. But let's be honest about what this is. This isn't people that all of a sudden have a massive concern about the legality of this. This is all about the Mueller probe. This is still people saying that the president's going to fire, he's going to disband the probe, he's going to fire everybody that's involved with it. And we've seen no indication of it. In fact, we've seen every indication that he's going to let this probe continue. But I think this is not as much a concern for how it was done as much as it is for trying to keep the Russia, the Mueller probe and everything out front. That's what this seems like to me.
Lisa, how does the White House solve this because it seems like a problem, maybe a bigger problem created by the Democrats, but how do you deal with it?
Well, I think anyone President Trump picks is going to receive criticism from the left and probably the media as well. So he can't win in that regard. We'll let the courts, as you said, litigate if it's constitutional or not for him to appoint Whitaker. But I will say Michael Mukasey, who you heard earlier, he had actually written a column for USA Today saying that the special counsel was never needed, should have never been done, and calling on the probe to end as soon as possible. Also, I would say if anyone has a conflict of interest here, in my opinion, it's Rod Rosenstein.
Bingo.
This is the guy who wrote the memo for firing James Comey and then appointed a special counsel to investigate the firing. So I think if anyone, he's got the conflict of interest, and President Trump should honestly just fire him.
And he also signed the last FISA warrant renewal on Carter Page, and I think that does involve the Russia investigation, does it not? So there's the other Rod Rosenstein conflict of interest.
That's what undermines the credibility of the lawsuit and goes to your point of when you're talking about the legality of it. And they say that instead Rod Rosenstein should be appointed, and he has such a huge conflict. So you're sort of like, when that's your argument for who should be there instead, I mean, doesn't he have at least as much of an appearance of a conflict?
So there's two separate issues. This one that's going through the courts because of Maryland, this lawsuit, is whether legally under the Vacancies Act he can be acting Attorney General. That has nothing to do with the Russia probe or recusal. They're saying Rod Rosenstein is the Senate confirmed person who should step into that position. Separately, there's the question of recusal in the Mueller probe. And we know now, because of reporting from Politico, I think today, that the Department of Justice is doing a review in their ethics office of whether Whitaker can, in fact, oversee this or whether there are grounds for recusal. This is what they did for Jeff Sessions. These are career people who look at these kinds of things all the time. We will see what their decision is. But I agree with the congressman. The way the White House can move past this is to nominate someone new. And I think you will hear from people like Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, an incoming senator, that in order to confirm a Trump nominee for this position, that attorney general will have to say, yes, yes, I will let the Mueller probe finish. You've already heard that from Susan Collins, and I think you will hear that from other
Trump
senators.
said the same thing, though, in fairness. President Trump has said, let's let the probe
target of it.
finish.
He's the target of it.
Hard to find somebody.
So I think that maybe he doesn't have as much credibility as a new nominee could by saying, here's why I'm going to let it finish. That will be a very important part of the
But
plan.
the AG works for him. It's
Right,
his administration.
but we do know that the Republicans will still have a majority in the Senate.
Yes.
Why not hustle and get somebody and just name somebody who will be the
I think that's what they should do. But I also think it's important to note, again, there's this like everybody's apoplectic that this Mueller probe is going to get shut down. There's been no indication of that. We hear people saying all the time that it's close to being wrapped up now. The Mueller probe is going to be wrapped up. It's going to go through to conclusion, and we'll be able to determine it from there.
I've said all along, I think it's a trick by some Democrats and liberal talking heads to goad and push the president into doing something that's not you, but push him into doing something that is not in his best interest or the best interest of anybody in this country.
But not Marie.
No, not Marie.
We cleared that.
Congress back in session for a high-stakes race to the end of the year with leadership of both parties up for grabs and some big issues on the table. What to expect in the lame duck session. Plus, a new study finds secret missile bases in North Korea, raising questions about the Kim regime's pledge to de-nuke. And now the president weighing in on that report.
Back in session today for a 4-week high-stakes sprint to the end of the year. Among the items on the agenda, leadership in next year's new Congress. House Republicans are set to elect the new minority leader tomorrow. Currently, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy is the favorite, but he faces a challenge from Ohio conservative Jim Jordan. Across the aisle, Democrats elect their leadership later this month, and current Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and her allies are increasingly making gender a central part of her bid to become Speaker of the House again, saying the party cannot afford to remove the only woman in leadership following a historic election for women. House Majority Whip Steve Scalise has something to say about that.
I think the real irony of this pink wave notion that they're advancing is that they spent millions of dollars defeating a lot of Republican women. You know, on one hand, she wants to play the gender card here, but she'll spend tens of millions of dollars to defeat Republican women.
There has been an anti-Pelosi movement among some Democrats since last year, and they now include incoming Congressman Max Rose of New York. Watch.
What I can tell you, because what I can control right now is my vote. And I am not voting for her. No ifs, ands, or buts under any circumstances. That's what I'm controlling right now. Are you worried?
Hello. Congressman, do you think he just signed his own political death warrant there?
Probably, but here's what's going to happen. He's going to come out, because I've seen it 100 times. He's going to say, I voted against her in conference, and she won in conference, and now we have to have a solidified, floor vote. So I'd love to see him vote against her on the floor. That's where, that's going to count. So it'll be interesting.
What about the Republicans?
But yeah, he's dead. She's probably not going to talk to him.
Probably, yeah. What about the Republicans?
It'll be McCarthy. He's great. He's done so much for us. Jim Jordan can mount his thing. He's doing what he's doing. Try to fundraise out of it. But no, I mean, if you look at like the immigration debate we had over the summer, we had an opportunity to solve immigration with a border wall and fixing our system.
Yeah.
He led the Freedom Caucus charge against a really good bill. And that's why we're still sitting here with an unsolved immigration thing. So he'll get a handful of votes. It'll be McCarthy, though.
I just want to point out, I called it more than once that Nancy Pelosi was going to play the gender card.
And there she goes.
In the year of the woman, you vote against me, you're anti-female. Again, it was, you could see it from 1,000 miles away.
So Nancy Pelosi, as of today, does not have the votes. There are a lot of new members who are elected, like Max Rose, like Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, who have said they will not vote for her. The challenge is that there's not one challenger that everyone will solidify around. So there will probably be a fight. Maybe someone like Seth Moulton. Other folks may throw their name. I don't think Tim Ryan's going to this time. He did last time around. But the thing is, what's so interesting, I actually agree that for my party, we need women in leadership, particularly in the current political climate. I just don't want Nancy Pelosi saying that because I think it plays into a narrative about her that is not not always fair, but also not always flattering.
I want to ask,
and she's historic, but part of being a good leader is knowing when it's time to move on.
I want to ask you about this sprint to the finish, though, because I'm very interested in that. This is what President Trump had to say about the sprint to the finish and the border wall and what could be involved there.
Are you prepared to go on a shutdown strategy during the lame duck, since this might be your last best chance?
Not necessarily
to secure that.
Look, I speak to Democrats all the time. They agree that a wall is necessary.
So no shutdown scenario.
I don't know. I can't tell you that. No, I can't
duck.
commit to that, but it's possible.
Well, I think Republicans have lost some leverage with Democrats taking back the House, so I think it's going to be more difficult to try to move a spending bill done in the lame duck. So Republicans lost some leverage there. But I would also say President Trump is a different kind of president, because remember what happened over the immigration fight with the in 2010, outgoing Democrat Representative Alan Boyd said that she is the face that defeated us, because remember, I was at the NRCC in 2010. All those ads were pointing to Nancy Pelosi and saying this Democrat's with her. And if she's the face of the Democrat Party, rather, in the House, that could come back to haunt them in 2020. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out as well.
It didn't hurt as much as people thought it might. I was worried about this cycle
because Democrats were in the minority, though. I think that changes if she's the Speaker of the House in a position of higher leadership.
People were saying if you vote for the Democrats, she's going to be the next Speaker. And the one thing she can do very well that will be necessary for my party after they take the House back is keeping the caucus together, putting forward a policy agenda to force the Senate and the president to actually make decisions on things like criminal justice reform, like immigration, like infrastructure. She can actually do that better than most people.
Two of the big things that are going to be on their plate starting in January are ratifying the Canada-Mexico trade deal that President Trump did, and then the debt ceiling. That's a little bit later in the year, about 2 months in. Yeah. That's going to be a huge fight. So mark my words. In terms of our economy, if you have Republicans and Democrats actually working together, it's going to mean a lot more spending. When we're now running $1 trillion budget deficits every year, you worried about longer term interest rates going up right now? They will skyrocket if you keep spending money.
I don't want to run out of time without, I mean, we have a congressman right here, so I want to ask you, I mean, first, the sprint to the finish, does anything get done here in the lame duck session? I mean, is there any thought, this is our last chance, we should actually do it?
I don't think there's going to be anything, groundbreaking and exciting that gets done. I'd like to see some big things done, but the reality is we have plenty on our plate that's just managing right now. We've got to get the farm bill done. That's important. We've got to finish up our spending for the rest of the year. That's going to be important. That's going to take a lot of effort. And there may be a few other things, but I have a hard time thinking there's going to be something massively groundbreaking. But I'd be excited if there is. But look, I guarantee you.
Maybe that's why you guys lost control.
Maybe. Well, I'll tell you what, though. We've done some huge things. It's been the most successful couple years. But I'll tell you what.
The tax cuts, my friend.
You didn't sell the tax
cuts.
He won.
Yeah, he took a vow earlier.
All right, sorry about that. My apologies, A new study, I couldn't resist. All right, a new study finds that North Korea is maintaining more than a dozen secret sites for its ballistic missiles program. Next, what that means for the Trump administration's push to get the regime to denuclearize after talks last week were abruptly called off.
New concerns about North Korea now, after a study finds the regime has more than a dozen secret missile operating bases where work continues on its ballistic missiles program. This from the D.C.-based Center for Strategic and International Security, which cited new satellite images. The report emphasizes the hidden bases are not launch facilities. No immediate comment yet from the State Department. But last week, the State Department called off a meeting in New York between Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and North Korea's leading nuclear weapons negotiator, and it has yet to be rescheduled. Vice President Mike Pence today in Japan saying progress is being made, but the administration is keeping the pressure on Pyongyang. Watch.
President Trump believes his relationship with Chairman Kim is good. And since their historic summit in Singapore in June, we've made good progress on the agreement that's reached. But more work remains. As we speak, another summit is being arranged. The sanctions will remain in full force until we achieve the final, fully verified denuclearization of North Korea.
Donald Trump also tweeting, Congressman, a few minutes ago, quote, "The story in the New York Times concerning North Korea developing missile bases is inaccurate. We fully know about the sites being discussed. Nothing new and nothing happening out of the normal, just more fake news. I will be the first to let you know if things go bad." Okay, so
I don't know about that last one.
I'm not sure about that last part,
Yeah.
but Congressman, you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee. You're obviously very steeped in these issues. The vice president mentioned the sanctions regime, but we have seen some of the international sanctions pressure start weakening. Other countries are not fully enforcing them. How are you looking at this new report? How concerned are you about what North Korea is doing?
Yeah, I'm very concerned. There's 2 points to this. There's 4 instruments of power: diplomatic, information, military, economic. In order to have any of those work against an adversary, diplomacy, you have to have a military option that's credible. One of my concerns was back in May or June, the president seemed to be removing the military option by suspending the war games and saying that Chairman Kim is his best friend now. With South Korea. And saying that Kim is his best friend. And I was afraid that that was letting off some of the pressure to compel North Korea to action. But look, it's a little bit different in that when the negotiations with Iran were occurring, it was happening for years and it was behind closed doors, and we weren't kept apprised about every aspect of the change until the deal was done. That's fine for how that happened. I didn't like the deal, but that's how the deal came about. This is the equivalent of that, but it's being played out in the public sphere. So every time there's a setback or something moving forward, we see about it, and it seems like this has been a really long period of time when it's only been a few months. So I'm not to the point yet of saying let's cut off all negotiations and get ready for the military option, but I do think this is a very concerning thing, and I do think it's probably time for the president and the Secretary of State to begin to ratchet up that pressure again, militarily, economically, et cetera.
And I just want to point out that really quickly, we kind of smile when President Trump tweets in the way that he does, but his South Korean the presidential office backed up what President Trump said in an earlier statement, that the U.S. and South Korean military intelligence were already aware of the sites mentioned in this report cited, and the analysis revealed nothing.
True, but keep in mind, South Korea, that the prime minister there, the president of South Korea, has been very much all about let's just make a deal with North Korea.
Right. It seems like the public posturing from the administration is trying to offer North Korea this brighter future of what they could be. But my question to you, is that something that Kim Jong-un or North Korea is interested in? Because it seems like for Kim Jong-un, his interest is in power and control. And so he wouldn't want those things for North Korea.
I think he'd be interested in it if it meant he stayed in power. Right now, he's basically deprived all his people. They have no hope. They have no opportunity. They have no information.
But isn't keeping them in that position?
And I think that's good for keeping him in power.
So, and Melissa and Dagan you both have a business background. We talk a lot about sanctions and the power of sanctions to ratchet up pressure. What more could we be doing? Because other countries are starting to take their foot off the gas here a little bit.
Well, I mean, I would point out that what the president also said, that the time horizon, I mean, there is no rush. He said the sanctions are on, the missiles have stopped, the rockets have stopped, and hostages have come home. And that does kind of put it in perspective. You know, we really have given up nothing. We've gotten hostages, and the posture, I mean, they're not firing off rockets all the time. So to kind of sit here and say...
But what has North Korea really given up?
Hostages and firing missiles.
Right.
But they still have all those missiles. They're just not testing them. Is that really a win?
They've made some small
better is
concessions.
better.
But I'll say in terms of the pulling back on the sanctions enforcement, we're in a trade fight. We're in a kind of multifaceted fight with China. We're trying to restart those trade negotiations. That's something that has to be on the table. We've had, obviously, last week, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was set to meet with his kind of counterpart, a senior North Korean official. That meeting canceled. In August, a planned trip to Pyongyang was canceled at the last minute. And you also have Nikki Haley, who's done kind of great work at the United Nations for the U.S., stepping aside at the end of the year. We said this sitting on this very sofa, Marie, that when President Trump met with Kim Jong-un, the statement was short, less than 500 words. There was no timeline, no roadmap for these negotiations for disarmament, and that was going to be an issue, and clearly it is right now.
Last word, Congressman. Should the U.S. re-engage in negotiations, stop canceling meetings, get back at the table with them?
No, I think canceling meetings is good. I think there needs to be a cost for North Korea's indigence, whatever that word is, entrenched intransigency. I don't know. I'm making up words.
Whatever.
No, it's okay.
But they're resistance. And I think there has to be a cost to that, and that has to be economic. And with, hey, we're not going to meet with you then. Because otherwise you're just satiating Kim Jong-un.
We'll keep watching this, definitely. Well, turning back to the U.S., with the dust still settling from the midterms, some analysts say one important demographic may have cost Republicans their House majority. What that is and whether it'll be a cause for concern for the president in 2020. Up next.
We're outnumbered in just a moment, but first, let's check in with Harris on what's coming up on Outnumbered Overtime. You're in Dallas today. I'm jealous.
Yes, I get around. Thank you, Melissa. I am at the George W. Bush Presidential Center on the campus of Southern Methodist University, highlighting a movement now to improve the lives of our military servicemen and women and their families. And speaking of President Bush, an attorney who was in the middle of the whole Bush-Gore Florida recount 18 years ago will join me on the recounts that are happening right now in Florida. Deja vu all over again. Plus, Congressman John Garamendi, who represents parts of Northern California on the deadly wildfire raging there, how his constituents are doing and what resources they really need. We can help, you know. Outnumbered Overtime, live from Dallas, Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, baby. Melissa?
It sounds wonderful. I'm going to stay right here on the couch. I'm going to watch the whole show. I can't wait. Harris, thank you.
We love it.
All right, well, President Trump touted the midterms as, quote, a tremendous success, but not everyone agrees. Political editor of the National Journal, Josh Kraushaar, writes, what should worry Trump is the GOP's glaring slippage in the suburbs, where brand name Republicans were unable to sustain the unstable coalition of white-collar professionals and populist-minded Trump fans that propelled so many down-ballot Republicans to victory in 2016. Congressman, obviously, I'm going to start with you on this. So you won your re-elect pretty handily, I might add, but some of your Illinois colleagues were not as lucky.
Yeah.
What changes did you see in your state this election cycle?
Illinois was kind of unique. We had I think, frankly, a weak governor running for re-election, so that a lot of people weren't driven to the polls on that. But, you know, look, there is a slippage of Republican support in the suburbs. Now, blue-collar areas, rural areas are actually going massively towards the Republican Party compared to what they used to, so it's almost an even swap. But that is an issue, and I think if we deny the fact that we are losing support in those suburban areas, that's a lot of seats. And I think if, you know, you do the postmortem of the election and you see where did we lose mostly, it is in those folks that used to vote Republican that, whether it's the president's tone or something, they're uncomfortable with, and they're not voting for us.
But Melissa, we see this time and time again. I remember back in 2009, the Republicans were an endangered species, and then they went on to win the House by picking up 63 seats in 2010. In 2012, there's this huge postmortem. Republicans are in trouble. 2014, they win the Senate and then win the White House in 2016. Should we be, you know, learning lessons from this, or do you think people are reading too much into it?
I think they're reading too much into it in the sense that the president put together an unusual coalition of people that was unexpected, and that's part of the reason why he won. And the fact that he couldn't hold that together when he wasn't on the top of the ballot shouldn't be the least bit surprising.
Well, Marie, do you think Democrats learned anything from this election in terms of, we saw a lot of these really progressive candidates not fare so well? Do you think that changes the dynamics for who Democrats pick to run in 2020?
Well, I hope it does. What's interesting to me, though, for my party is that after 2016, there was a lot of angst in my party about the, quote, death of the Midwestern Democrat. We lost Michigan, we lost Wisconsin, we lost Ohio, Pennsylvania. This cycle, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, set aside Ohio, but we did pretty well in the Rust Belt, actually, in both Senate and governors and House races. So when you look at the Electoral College, that's one thing I took away from this. I don't think the Rust Belt is lost to Democrats. What it taught me is good candidates really matter. Candidates really matter.
Well, and then you can have a local halo effect or an anti-halo effect. I look at Corey Stewart in Virginia. That hurt Dave Bratt. That hurt Barbara Comstock. Denver Riggleman was lucky to win the 5th, quite frankly, although running against a Washingtonian and New Yorker, that helped him.
Well, one thing I know, we will talk about this much more on the couch in the future. So, all right, well, more Outnumbered is in just a moment, so stay tuned.